Hello and welcome to the Daily Space for today, February 19th, 2019. I am your host, Dr. Pamela Gay, and I am here to put science in your brains. Today we have a special extended episode, as we tend to have on Tuesdays, where first I'm going to cover some news stories coming to us from a variety of different institutions around the world, and then I'm going to do a deep dive into the science and engineering going into the Mars 2020 launch window and the missions we are preparing for it. So in today's first story, I have a tale of galaxies seen in another color of light. The LOFAR project, a low-frequency array telescope, has been doing a detailed survey of the sky using long radio wavelengths. These particular colors of light are specifically good at detecting star-forming regions, at detecting the material that is excited around black holes. Basically, they're great for seeing star-forming galaxies and active galactic nuclei at a whole variety of different distances. Using this particular telescope set and the survey it created, astronomers from 18 different nations have combined their efforts to put out a catalog of hundreds of thousands of previously unknown galaxies. This is helping us understand, the large-scale structure of our universe in new detail, is helping us see just how prevalent are different kinds of actively feeding black holes, just how prevalent are different kinds of clusters of galaxies that we weren't able to see through other means that are biased towards the most massive clusters of galaxies. This is also helping us to find how magnetic fields are affecting a variety of different systems, as those magnetic fields cause electrons to stream along the field lines and give off radio emission. It is a good day for those of us who are interested in extragalactic astronomy, as we have so many more new systems to go out and explore. Now, moving a little bit closer to home, we have new information on just how one should view the bilobate comets that are out there orbiting through our solar system. These particular systems, here shown as represented by Chirigiri, the comet that the Rosetta mission visited, are systems that have two main spheres of material that are in contact with one another loosely, but are being affected through a variety of different forces. Now, in physics, what we often talk about is the differences between stress and strain. Strain is where you have a system, and here I'm trying to find, there we go. I had a spring just to discuss this. So here is a spring, and strain is what happens when you pull the system apart or compress it together. These kinds of compressional and stressing forces can tear objects apart. Strain is what happens when you get sideways forces that tear things apart. Well, in the case of these bilobate comets, it is the stress of the two different spheres getting tugged on with different amounts of gravity, with different amounts of, the forces associated with rotating objects, centripetal and centripetal force. All of these different stresses on these two lobes are working to create lines of stress in the ice that appear as cracks and fissures, where the system is literally getting torn apart. So this is just one more bit of information helping us understand just how complex these systems are. Now, what's kind of cool in looking at these fractures and these terraces in the neck of this particular rubber duck-shaped comet is it allows us to start to imagine the kinds of things that occurred to first put this system together. To get this kind of a fragile system, you don't have a violent impact. What you actually have instead is two systems that gradually merge together through a slow and gentle process, being gravitationally pulled together in the outer parts of the solar system. It's when these systems come inward, when they race past the sun, that all of these, stresses on the system occur, causing these cool geological features to be formed. It is not a gentle life for these comets, but lucky for us, it does appear to be a gentle configuration for the objects like 2014 MU69, which is also a bilobate object that exists out in the outer solar system. So, if you are a two-lobed object that forms gently in the outer solar system, the moral of the story is, if you want to avoid stress, avoid the sun and keep yourself out in the Kuiper Belt. So we are grateful for Chirigiri coming into the inner solar system, making it easy for us to, study it with the Rosetta mission and to see how it changed through its solar encounter. So that's really the bulk of the news for today. Now, I am going to answer a few questions before switching over to discuss the Mars 2020 landing window that is coming up and the missions that we're planning to take advantage of it. So if you want to go ahead and type in your questions, please remember to at me. Type in at CosmoQuest X. That will make your questions stand out. While you're getting those questions typed in, I just want to remind you that the daily space is part of CosmoQuest. We are your place to learn and do science. Please give us a follow. Follows are free, and it will help you find out all those times that we go live. The Daily Space is brought to you most Mondays through Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. That is 6 p.m. London time. We also bring you the Sunday Science Hour at the exact same time, just to make things easy for you. We also go live whenever launches and landings occur that are live streamed. We are a production of the Planetary Science Institute, working in collaboration with Youngstown State University. We are supported by you. We are here thanks to your subscriptions and thanks to your bits, and we are so grateful for your continued support that makes everything we do possible. So thank you for all of your generous contributions. So I'm going to go ahead and find your questions in the chat. Scrolling backwards, I see Larry asking, is a three-lobed object possible? I don't see why it wouldn't be, but it would certainly be less likely to occur. You'd need to have the two-lobed object form first and then gravitationally find and grab onto a third object. So it's possible, it's just less likely. What is common, as near as we can tell, is for objects to get partially shattered and then come back together, leading to a rubble pile of an object that is gravitationally held together. So Henny's Vorwerp is asking, would one of these stressing events cause a comet to momentarily brighten? Well, it depends on exactly how the stress manifests. If that stress causes a bunch of volatiles to get exposed to sunlight, you can get jets and other brightening to occur. You can also get that just because the sunlight happened to heat up just the right place on the surface of the comet. So lots of different things, including stress, can contribute to brightening, but stress won't always contribute to brightening. There's a lot of sometimes either or answers in science. Let's see what other questions. random reference to porcupines, scrolling along. Ed Thompson is saying, just curious, but any update on the mapping projects on CosmoQuest? We just finished doing, not that you can see it, we just finished doing a test run of things for the OSIRIS-REx mission, which is going to be using our project to map out Bennu. We needed to get that done behind the scenes so that it is ready when their science paper releases. Now that we are done with the behind the scenes work on Bennu, we are going to be working on the in front of the scenes release of projects. Tanner and so Herleu and Tim, who you may have seen over in Discord or on the chat here, are coming over as soon as I'm done with the daily space, and we're going to be working on coding together later today. So hopefully I'll have some updates for you on Thursday. So Hanny asks, so we would not ever see two-lobed asteroids due to different birth history. There's actually a bunch of two-lobed asteroids. They can form in the exact same way. It's just a slow combination of objects. Anytime things come together slowly, you can end up with bilobate. So gluten-free space, I think space is generally gluten-free. That is an accurate username. Asks, how far from the sun does a comet need to be to start producing a coma or tail? I know they can have them at the distance of Mars. They generally don't have them at the distance of Jupiter. So somewhere between Jupiter and Mars, they can grow tails. I'm sorry that isn't the most accurate, or I guess it is accurate. It's not the most precise of answers. In part, it's going to depend on just how crusted over the comet is, how much volatiles it has on its surface just waiting to be released. We do have mostly dead crusted over comets closer into the sun that don't have tails or comas or anything. So depending on objects, somewhere between Jupiter and Mars, they grow a coma and a tail. Yeah, it is that far out, disillusioned. It is that far out. There is actually an incident with the MAVEN mission, which is designed to measure the atmosphere of Mars, where it was arriving at Mars about the same time the Siding Springs comet was enveloping Mars with its tail. So there was a little bit of getting too up close and personal with another world and a comet tail. And we actually did shift the orbits of some of the Mars spacecraft to make sure they were on the far side of Mars when the comet was on the near side of Mars. So Hanny's Vorverp is asking, so how about the space diamonds like Ryugu? How do they differ? We have no clue how Ryugu and Bennu, these multi-sided dice-shaped comets, come into being. Stay tuned. I expect to see lots of theories coming out in the next year. This was one of those shapes we just hadn't envisioned, and we found it ×2. Yeah, that comet near Mars would have been a great show, but we didn't get to see it. So someday we will too get re-enveloped in a comet's tail. This has happened to us in the past. I expect it will happen again. There is a song called "The Stars Over Alabama" that is actually about when the Earth was going through a meteor shower that had just been replenished by its comet, and it was an amazing thousands of comets per moment kind of, not comets, thousands of meteorites per moment kind of event. So yeah, go look up the story behind this, the Stars Over Alabama song. The night stars fell on Mars. That, yes, that was a thing. And it is a Billie Holiday song. Thank you, Paranor, for finding that so quickly and effectively. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to talking about the Mars 2020 launch window. Now, you may have noticed in recent years that we seem to have this steady stream of spacecraft headed on their way to Mars on kind of an every other year or so kind of basis. This is because of the repeating alignment of Mars and Earth in their orbits. There is a low energy orbital path to get from Earth to Mars, where you put your spacecraft into an elliptical orbit where the closest to the sun part of that orbit is when the spacecraft is on Earth, and the furthest from the sun part of the orbit is when the spacecraft arrives at Mars. By launching when Mars is on its way towards that spot, you can have Mars and the spacecraft arrive at the same place in space at the same moment. This kind of a perfect alignment of these two worlds occurs roughly, but not precisely, every 2 years. And with this kind of a set of orbits, you have 0.7 of a year to get to Mars. You have roughly 1 year on Mars, and then, if you wanted to, you could actually leave and return to Earth on the same kind of an orbit, with it taking another 0.7 to get back. So as we look towards the future, we're looking at 2.4 years for the optimal low energy round trip ticket to Mars. Now, right now, we're not yet ready to do round trip to Mars, but we are ready to keep launching things one after another, going towards the red planet. Now, as we look to see when is that next optimal window going to occur, we are looking at 2020. And this is where we have the ever so boringly named Mars 2020 rover. And I'm looking up the exact launch window because I inadvertently closed that window on my computer. So Mars 2020, we're currently looking at roughly a July 2020 launch date. Now, with Mars 2020, the U.S. mission, there are some concerns. I'm just going to be flat out honest here. There are some concerns that the mission may not make its launch window. Mars 2020 is a follow-up to Curiosity. The two rovers are very similar in design. Mars 2020 has a more bold plan. It's actually going to be going out and picking up rocks, collecting them in a container it will be carrying, that it is hoped a follow-up mission will be able to then take from Mars 2020 and bring back to Earth. This bold mission looks to land someplace that has a surface that is regularly getting revealed. This means we're looking at sand dune areas. We're looking at areas where the blowing winds, the changing weather is constantly revealing fresh soils that haven't been exposed to the sun for long periods of time. This is important because ultraviolet light from the sun can break down organic materials, the kinds of stuff that is necessary for life. We are mission by mission following the water, following the organics on Mars, trying to figure out just where a future mission should go looking for life. We don't know if Mars has life, but we want to find out. We want to figure out these questions. Now, the Mars 2020 rover is currently behind schedule and over budget, which means don't get too excited about how NASA got an increased budget. NASA's also gotten a lot of increased things to pay for, with James Webb over budget, with Mars 2020 over budget, with new desires to get to the moon as quickly as possible. So there is a backup plan for Mars 2020 to instead launch in Mars 2022, so don't be surprised if we see a renamed rover. It also won't stay named Mars 2020. There are campaigns in the workings to rename it, as always, by asking for public input on just what this spacecraft should be named. Now, ESA, with their ExoMars follow-on rover, is a little bit ahead of the game. ESA is planning to launch this extraordinarily, I'm not going to say photogenic, I am going to instead say illustratable. This gorgeous little robot, like so many of the Mars rovers, has that tall neck with the 2 cameras on it that allow it to have stereoscopic vision that makes it easier for it to find its way across the red planet. This particular mission is being built by the Europeans. It will be deployed off of a Russian surface platform, which you can see off in the distance here in this artist's illustration. And it's going to travel across the Mars surface and also look for signs of life and also collect samples and drill to do analysis using an onboard laboratory. This is going to be a new way of a spacecraft combining the features of a solid, non-moving exploration platform and a rover that can go out and collect samples as it roves. This is an international collaboration, and one of the things you may have noticed is that the Mars ExoMars, that was a strange way of phrasing that, the ExoMars rover by ESA is very similar in purpose and capacity to Mars 2020. If you've been following this mission for a long time, you may know that at one point Mars 2020 rover from the US and the ExoMars rover from the European Space Agency were actually one international collaboration that enjoined the US NASA space program with ESA. It no longer is that particular collaboration, and this is because ESA grew concerned after regular changes to NASA meant that launch dates were slipped, that missions were scrapped, that things kept changing that ESA had invested in. It's really hard to collaborate when your partner keeps changing the course of action. Since NASA is somewhat at the whim of Congress, well, ESA just felt that they were better off collaborating with Roscosmos instead. So politics is at play as we look at these two very, very similar missions make their plans to make their way to the red planet. Now, as we discussed last week, the ExoMars rover has been given the name Rosalind Franklin. It is named after the amazing chemist Rosalind Franklin, who died far too young in her late 30s of ovarian cancer. She is responsible for multiple men getting Nobel Prizes. Her early in-life collaboration with Watson and Crick led to them getting the Nobel Prize for the discovery, made largely by her, of the structure of DNA. And then some of her collaborators after her death went on to get a Nobel Prize for the structure of the crystals and viruses that they studied. She was a tremendous researcher. I wish she'd lived longer so that she could have seen this robot that is carrying her name. Of course, if she was still alive, it probably wouldn't carry her name. Anyways, I'm going to end there. This is what we have to look forward to in 2020 or 2022, depending how the launches may fall. So I will now go back to answering more questions. And once again, I'm going to ask you to please at me in the chat, at CosmoQuestX. Flipping windows. There we go. Canada does make arms and wheels. So Larry Weird and Proud asks, is China working with any other nations? And the answer is largely no. This is because Congress doesn't allow scientists to work with China without all sorts of very special restrictions, and there is no allowed collaboration in outer space. So China, for instance, is banned from the International Space Station per basically U.S. Congress. This means that China is largely going it alone right now and is working on, well, making tremendous advances on its own. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in coming years, especially as it's currently unclear if NASA is going to be renewing its lease for the International Space Station. Just what nations will occupy the space station if we leave? At that point, China would be free to join in, but they're also in the process of looking to design their own space station. It's going to be interesting times. So Gluten-Free Space asks, how far is China from putting a manned mission to the moon? It's unclear. They hope to do it by 2030, but I think everyone hopes to do it by 2030. So let's see what actually happens. I could go with poutine for all, Paranor. Are you offering to make poutine? I like poutine. You can't get good poutine in the Midwest. Looking to see. So Larry is asking, so the Mars flying drone is just a dream. I don't know if it's just a dream. I think that's unfair to say. It's more a matter of it doesn't look like a sure thing for the 2020 launch window, but it may fly on future missions. It's a new technology. It's really hard to get permission to add new technologies to massive missions. Mark Watney bot. That would be fascinating. Oh man. Okay, I'm going to ignore the chat and go back to discussions of poutine. We can always drone on Titan. You know, we can do better than drone on Titan. One of my favorite random scientific facts is that the gravity is so low on Titan and the atmosphere is so thick that an average human of average physical capacity, were they given lightweight wings to wear on their arms, is capable of flapping with sufficient force to fly like a bird on Titan. We need more fiction stories that take advantage of that fact. So that I think manages to conclude everything I had planned for today. It's a slow news day, so we're going to get out of here kind of early. Yeah, Hanny, I'd love to get going to Titan. So I'm going to say thank you all for joining me. Let me look and see who is available to raid. Thank you, Giovanni Martel, for the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you. You just made it easier for me to pay Annie this month. Literally, when you guys support us with subs and bits, you are helping me make payroll. Thank you for helping me make payroll. Everyday people are what fund science nowadays. Sometimes it's through your tax dollars. Quite often, and becoming more often, it's through your donations and support of various projects, whether it be scientists who are reaching out on Indiegogo or Kickstarter, or people like us who are here on Twitch. Thank you. We are so grateful that in this day and age, there are people willing to support science. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yay, happiness. I'm going to look and see who I can raid. Now, the place I always go to look is the Knowledge Fellowship. It is a collection of streamers who stream educational content right here on Twitch. That's where I am. It looks like Rocketology is currently live with a 1/4 real scale rocket that is getting tested, provisional mod list in Discord's mods. I'm not quite sure what that means, but Let's go find out. So if you stick around after the raid, please give Rocketology, as they play Kerbal Space, a amazing stompy foot welcome. So wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for being here, and have a fabulous morning, evening, or afternoon, and get outside and look up. Bye-bye.